just about
I
ready?
think we're all ready to roll.
Okay. Great. So it's 6:33 and I'd like to call to order our Tuesday, June 29th, 2021 City of Saco Planning Board meeting. We are holding the meeting tonight via Zoom. This is planned to be our last remote meeting, actually. So next time we will be in person. So with us tonight, we have myself, Alyssa Bouchot. I'm currently the chair of the planning board. Other planning board members in attendance, our vice chair, Matt Provenzel, Jeffrey Grossman is with us, Jen Day is with us, Matt DiCiani is with us, and Joyce Leary Clark as well. City planner Bob Hamlin is with us this evening, being assisted by Andrew Dickinson. And then we also have the city engineer, Joe LeBarrier. And we may have others join us from city staff throughout the night. So with that being taken care of, the first order of business we have on our agenda tonight are the minutes of our previous meeting from June 15th. And this does start on page 2 of our packet. So I'll take any comments, edits, questions. Any motions?
Madam Chair, this is Joyce. I move to approve the minutes of the June 15th, 2021 meeting as presented.
Thank you, Joyce. Is there a second?
I second.
Jen, thank you for the second. Sorry, my screen's up now. Any discussion?
Recording in progress.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, I'll call for a vote. Jeff?
Well, I wasn't here, so I don't know
Oh.
if we should vote on it or not. So
You can abstain if you'd like, since you weren't here.
Probably abstain.
Okay, thank you. Matt P.
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Matt D.
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So minutes have passed with 5 positive votes and 1 abstention. Okay. The next item on our agenda tonight, I think we might have lost Bob, but he will be joining us in a second again. This is a proposed amendment to the permitted and conditional uses in the industrial zone. And I believe Bob is going to be giving an overview on this. This does start in page 8 of our packet. We do not have Jessa with us this evening, but I think she's briefed Bob on a few things. So, Andrew, I'm not sure if you have Bob reconnecting with us.
I don't see him yet, but I'll shoot him an email right now and see what's going on.
Okay, he's showing in my attendees list right now.
Okay, I'm promoting him now.
Great.
Good. Thank you, Andrew. I left on one device and came back on another so I can see all your smiling faces. Yes, the initial item on the agenda tonight is as workshopped, I believe, at the last meeting with the adoption of the new zoning ordinance in April. As was anticipated, staff, the best way to get familiar with a new car, take it for a drive. How do you get familiar with the new ordinance? Use it 5 days a week and sometimes over the weekend too. So as both primarily the planning and code departments have gotten more familiar with the ordinance, and I should certainly mention my economic development partners as well. Occasionally we run into issues. That's not what was meant, or we forgot to migrate that from the old ordinance to the new, or that sort of thing. what Denise and Jessa from Economic Development encountered recently was a number of uses that were not brought over and or that simply make sense and that they would like to see in the current industrial zone. Some existed in either the I1, I2, or I3 zones previously in the older ordinance. So there's a combination of a couple few that are tried and true here, business/professional office for one, that was in the old ordinance is not in the new ordinance. And so what Denise and Jessa are proposing is to, or they have taken a look at the new industrial zone, compared that to the old I1, 2, and 3 zone, and have put forth a list of 7 uses that they would like to see the board and then the city council consider for addition to the new zoning ordinance, the industrial zone in particular. So I've made a quick list of gleaned through the 3-3 that has been presented as an exhibit. And simply put, the two ladies have gone right to the I zone on the far right of table 3-3 and inserted either a draft C for conditional use or P for permitted use. And they've done that, impacting proposed new uses that they'd like to see. The one permitted use is that I just mentioned, business/professional office. And then there are 6 proposed conditional uses, starting with automotive repair and fuel services. Also outpatient clinic services, veterinarian, commercial recreation, health club, and enclosed sports facility. So none of these appear in the new ordinance, and Denise and Jess are proposing that if added to the new ordinance, they could be put to good use. So this has been advertised as a public hearing. Again, I believe we workshopped it on the 15th. A late breaking addition to this, and I believe I sent along an email to this effect. Last night, the city council discussed and passed a first reading to consider an amendment to the covenants for the 2 industrial parks and the 1 business park that exist in Saco. This is in reaction to some of the trials and tribulations that the school department is going through with a full-on reopening scheduled for September. Do they have enough space in existing school buildings to be able to spread out as A, either they'd like to, or B, as perhaps the state of Maine is still dictating, and or I suppose the CDC. The thinking has been that if push comes to shove, then potentially location, all existing buildings in the industrial park could be utilized for school space. So the first step in making that possible was taken last night by the council in a vote to go ahead and allow for the emergency use of properties within the parks for both K-8 and by Thornton Academy. This morning, Jessa, it occurred to Jessa that, okay, that takes care of part of the issue, the existing covenants that impact a number of things in the parks, but most prominently what uses are allowed. But the zoning ordinance ran through Jessa's thoughts as well, and she realized, hey, the new zoning ordinance does not allow what used to be referred to as private and public schools. It is no longer an allowed use in the I zone. So she talked with the city attorney. She and Tim agreed that with this now before the council and with this particular item up before the planning board this evening, that is proposed changes to uses in the industrial district. No reason that we couldn't tag schools, public and private, as a conditional use is what Jessa is proposing. So one additional use that would be allowed in the industrial district, that would be public and private schools. So now that I've thoroughly confused you, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to respond, but pretty much in a nutshell, we're just looking to add a handful of uses that either have existed previously or that our economic development folks think would be good additions at this time. And then that seventh use, public and private schools, is in response to other legislation that's currently moving through the city council. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Bob. Board members, any questions so far on this? Joyce?
Joyce, I have a question. I'm just a little concerned that the use for public and private schools is being added today, and it wasn't noticed as part of the public hearing. So any members of the public who are concerned by that particular use in the industrial zone wouldn't know unless they happen to be on this call.
Joyce, I don't discount that as a concern at all. That was my first response to Jessa when she and I talked about this afternoon. She evidently raised the issue with Tim as well. He seemed to feel that in that the board was already looking at proposed additional uses. He did not argue, let's put it that way, in terms of adding this on as a seventh use to the six that were proposed already. And that's about the best I've got for a response. I think there's absolutely some validity to the concern you raised, Joyce. Due process and adequate notice is just absolutely widely accepted and, as you know, legally required. So I appreciate the concern.
And Bob, just to follow up on that topic, this would go to council and have how many public hearings after we make a recommendation?
Yeah, last night, this was what's called a new business item. Essentially, it functions as a workshop. So after this, there'll be 3 more meetings, first reading, then there will be a public hearing, and then finally there will be a second and final reading, at which time the council puts it to a vote.
Any other questions, comments? Jen?
Thank you. This is a question for Bob, and I apologize if it was covered in a meeting prior to my jump on. What is the status of Saco in terms of opting in for marijuana use? I see that there is a medical care provider in a couple of zones and registered dispensary, but I wonder, does commercial greenhouse and nursery, does that umbrella for that type of cultivation? Or from my understanding, coming from where I came from, that's a different zoning identifier? And then is there any, did the city not opt into recreational storefront?
Yeah, good questions. The quick answer on the commercial greenhouse and nursery, that goes back to a more innocent time. No, that precedes any local discussion of legalized marijuana. And so when you see commercial greenhouse and nursery, think of a Moody's greenhouse or something along those lines. It is not, cannabis oriented at all. Secondly, no, the city has not opted in yet. There's a current situation with an application having been submitted and rejected on the advice of the city attorney for a registered dispensary. An appeal has already been lodged to that rejection. So we're about to get, the city is about to get much more involved in determining its direction in that regard, to opt in or not to opt in. May be decided by the council in the near future. There's also been mentioned potentially of it being put out to a local referendum. But as far as status currently, the city of Saco has not opted into legalized or adult use or recreational marijuana.
So then a dispensary is just a distribution, a permitted distribution location?
And assumedly solidly within the medical marijuana column as opposed to recreational use column.
Okay, I was a little perplexed by that lack of identifier, that it just says registered dispensary, that it could be medicinal or recreational, but since the city hasn't opted in for recreational, then at this point, it's only medicinal.
Exactly. That's my understanding. Yes. So this has been advertised as a public hearing. I have not personally taken any inquiries from the public, nor am I aware that my compadres in economic development have. So with that, Madam Chairwoman, I think if there are more questions, great. If not, perhaps a motion to open a public hearing may be in order.
Great.
Might I sneak one more question in?
Yep.
HPD for the bed and breakfast inn, C-HPD. What, I'm not familiar with that coding.
That historic preservation, Bob?
Oh, that
Are you,
makes sense.
Jen, are you fine? It may well be. Where are you finding that now?
So on page 1 of 4 for the tables, bed and breakfast.
Um,
So it's a conditional
Yeah.
historic preservation.
exact conditional in the HPD Historic Preservation District. Yes.
Okay, I was singing happy birthday, but it's not happy birthday.
I like it. Maybe that's what we need, a happy birthday district.
Any other questions for Bob? Hearing none, do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Thanks, Joyce. Is there a second?
Second.
Matt D, thank you for the second. Without discussion, I'll call for a vote. Joyce,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Matt P,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Matt D,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Okay, so Andrew, we just opened a public hearing on this item. Typically, when Isabel's with us, she gives a short introduction to the public just as far as the features of Zoom and using the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in by phone, I believe it's *69.
I believe it's *9. So anyone dialing in that would like to speak to the planning board on this issue could press *9. Those using the Zoom app can raise their hand at the bottom center of the screen, and I will introduce you and allow you to speak.
Perfect.
So we've got dial-in caller 207-212-6815. Alyssa, does Isabel typically allow to talk, or does she promote to panelists?
We're typically seeing them promoted.
Okay.
Yep.
So since this is dial-in, it's allow to talk is the only option, but
Okay.
so we'll go that way for now. So I have allowed you to talk. I believe you'll hit *6 to unmute and address the planning board. We are-
And, oh, yeah.
We're not hearing you yet, so I believe you need to hit *6 to unmute.
is Michelle Hathaway. Are you able to hear me?
We are. Could you just repeat your first and last name and your address for the record?
I can. This is Michelle Hathaway. I'm director of the Margaret Murphy Centers for Children, which is located on Industrial Road in Saco, and I live in Turner, Maine.
Okay, thank you.
I'm calling in as an agency. We have a vested interest in the allowable use of special purpose private schools and child care centers within the industrial areas. We currently have one large location that has been up and in operation for about 5 years. And it has been our goal to expand that operation into properties somewhere we're hoping within the actual industrial park that we're in. We've been working with a realtor in the last couple of months to start to explore those options for us as we've come to pretty close capacity at where we're located, and would like to keep the program within close operating distance for a whole host of reasons that are beneficial to our staff and programming. And so we're very hopeful that the private school provision would be allowed.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Andrew, I'll turn back to you to see if you have any other hands raised that you see.
At this time, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'll just state one more time. If you'd like to address the planning board, use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you're dialing in, you'll indicate that by pressing *9.
And board members, this is Bob Hamblin. While we're waiting to see if we have another speaker, Madam Chairwoman, if I may just inject something here. Regarding the schools as just referenced by Michelle, again, going back to the old zoning ordinance, public and private schools were in fact an allowed use. They were permitted in both the I-1 and the I-3 zones, and conditional in the I-2 zone. So just a little history for you.
And no one else has indicated that they would like to speak at this time.
Okay, great, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, Andrew, do you know, is Jessa Berna in the audience?
She is. I'll go ahead and promote Jessa now.
Hi, Jessa.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to join you. I just thought I'd pop on to try and answer any questions, as I did kind of throw you a last minute curveball this afternoon. So I wanted to just be here to try and address any questions associated with that. I know Joyce already had a question, and I can jump in with that or just let you guys discuss and answer as things come up, whatever you prefer.
Madam Chair, if I may, Jess, I related to the board what you and I discussed and gave a little background on this. I also mentioned that I believed you had talked to City Attorney Tim Murphy about concerns about adding this in at comparatively the last minute. Could you address whatever was discussed between the two of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Bob mentioned, that in the first reading for amending the covenants for the business and industrial parks to allow schools to operate within the business parks as an emergency use, kind of prompted by COVID and the need for more space. And then we thought maybe there'll be other emergency uses that come up, like a natural disaster or another pandemic, hopefully not. But we did talk about, but then as I was speaking to that item of the covenants, I realized that the zoning would actually prohibit those uses from happening in the business parks because whichever is most restrictive really rules the day. So I had a conversation with Tim Murphy and I let him know that this item was coming before the planning board tonight. And his interpretation was, the public hearing was advertised with a recommendation for changes to the industrial zone. And the board has discretion to make any changes to that recommendation. Tonight, for example, from public hearing, we just had someone say that they had an interest in adding schools. So he thought that it was within the planning board's purview to add or subtract any uses from what was advertised in the public hearing in your recommendation that you might make if you felt that was appropriate to do so. And then also just in terms of process, I would note that once the planning board makes a recommendation on the zoning amendment, it will go to the city council where they'll have a first reading and a public hearing that will include all the changes. So given those two things, Attorney Murphy felt very comfortable that that it wasn't violating any access laws with making any changes tonight, given that it is focused on uses in the industrial zone.
Great, thank you, Jessa. Board members, any other questions for Jessa? Okay, hearing none. Jessa, if you want to hang with us for a couple more minutes, we still have a public hearing open right now. Andrew, I don't think I've seen any other hands go up.
You're correct.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, if there's no further comments from the public, I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
A second?
Thank you, Jen, for the second. Without discussion, I'll call for a vote. Joyce?
Yes.
Matt P?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Matt D?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Okay, Andrew, we've closed the public hearing. Thank you for your help with that. Back to the board. Further questions, comments? Jen? Yes, go ahead.
This is a question. So where education was previously permitted and then was removed from being allowed to, does it create, so the folks that occupy currently in that previously permitted use or grandfathered to continue use, if they vacate the property under that use, is it now erased from use or would be considered non-conforming? So in other words,
Yeah.
does the grandfather follow the person using it or the property?
The property. So if the Murphy School, and I hope I'm getting that right, the Murphy Center for Children, if they vacated the property, if a new entity showed up and wanted to continue it as a school, if that happened within a 12-month period, they're all set. The grandfathering remains in place for 1 year after after one closes down. But if you go beyond that 1 year, you're out of luck. At that point, it would be a non-conforming use and it would not be allowed to reestablish.
And either Bob or Jessa, can you tell me if that is the only property in that zone that is currently being used for educational purposes, or are there others so that we would be disrupting a homogeneous alignment of use?
Jessa, I'm not aware of any other commercial or public schools, private or public schools in the I zone.
Isn't the preschool in there?
Yeah, we're in the former Toddle Inn. That's my understanding, is that there is that preschool use. And I'm not aware of any others, but that is not to say there aren't any others. I can't say for sure.
Jen, are you good with your questions?
It would progress to a comment versus a question at that point, just that if there are existing and it was in the previous zoning, I would be in favor of allowing it to exist because I don't think that it changes the nature of use in that zone.
And I had a question. Yeah, sorry. What would be the concern to not allow it? I guess is that I'm looking for an argument or a reason to not allow it. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Or is there something that I'm missing? Are there rules or federal laws that prohibit? I'm curious about that.
Jessa, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I do. So first of all, schools have been permitted in the industrial zone in the old ordinance. They've been allowed for quite some time without any problem. So I think from a zoning perspective, there hasn't been any issue with conflicts of use or anything. I will say part of the industrial zone is regulated by business park covenances. And in business parks, the covenances are restrictive of basically not-for-profit uses, including schools. So they wouldn't traditionally be allowed in a business park unless it has special permission from the council. And as I mentioned previously, or maybe Bob mentioned at the city council last night, we're proposing an amendment to the covenances that would allow more flexibility for schools for Saco schools to occupy business and industrial park lots in an emergency.
Okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
And Madam Chair, if I may, a little bit longer term, the Murphy School, I worked with them, as did Joe, as did the code office a few years ago. In fact, perhaps a board member or two recalls. They've been there for at least a handful of years. I'm sorry, I can't quantify exactly for how long, but a few years ago, they approached the city, simply wanted to add some more parking. So to the best of my recollection, I believe that came before the planning board.
Yeah.
Their mission is a good one. They deal with children, young people. Exactly on what basis, I'm not familiar with, I'm afraid. But the fact is that they have done nothing wrong. They're operating what I believe operates as a private school. And what happened to them, but the city changed the zoning on them. So all of a sudden they become a grandfathered non-conforming use. So they can continue to operate, but they can't expand that building, or they cannot expand their operation because they are non-conforming. So if for no other reason, the notion that this, well-functioning use has been there for a while and has through no fault of its own become a grandfathered use. The board might consider wanting to do something about returning schools, public and private, as at least say a conditional use to the new ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I guess
Joy?
that was my question was, are you proposing to add it back in as a conditional or permitted use? Maybe that's a question for Jessa.
Mhm.
I recommended conditional in my memo this afternoon, but that was simply just to give there to be a path for, and I was kind of focused on the industrial parks, but I, from an economic development perspective, would be comfortable with either. I believe in 2 out of the 3 industrial districts, it was previously permitted, and I think maybe in the I2 it was conditional previously, just for comparison.
Right.
Okay. Joyce, any other thoughts on that as far as conditional, permitted?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any reason not to have it as a permitted use. I don't think it, I mean, there's going to be review anyway of any proposals. I don't really believe we're going to have a giant rush of schools coming into the industrial park.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Board members, any other thoughts on specifically schools and the concept of having them be permitted? Jen?
Support Joyce's statement. As I see as a community and as a state, things like childcare are at a huge deficiency, and it makes sense if it's where people work, then it would be convenient to have children or education-based services within reasonable access. So I support what Joyce has proposed. And as a permitted, not necessarily a conditional.
Great, thanks, Jen. Any other thoughts? Other board members? Okay, hearing no other thoughts. So Jessa, at this point, you're looking for us to make a recommendation on all of this, right? And Bob, how would you like to approach our recommendation? Should we be taking a motion and a vote, or and handling these separate things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sorry I hadn't prepared a recommended motion. The board may regard this as a brief but critical test, tongue in cheek, to on the spot here compose simply a recommendation, and this would be either a positive or a negative recommendation for the draft changes to the I zone.
Draft
So-
changes with the inclusion of the schools.
I agree. Yep, and you're certainly willing or able to specify or that specifically in as much as it's just been presented to the board this evening. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board make a positive recommendation to adopt the draft changes presented to us for permitted and conditional uses in the industrial zones, with the addition of schools dash public and private as permitted uses in both BI and I zones.
Madam Chair, Matt P. here. I would second that.
Thank you, Joyce, for the motion and Matt P. for the second. Discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote on Joyce's motion. Jen?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Matt D?
Yes.
Matt P?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Okay, thank you, Jessa, for joining us. And
Thank you very much for having me.
okay, great. So Bob, are we all set on this item?
We are. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is site plan review for a proposed commercial solar energy facility and associated site improvements located at located on New County Road. This is pertaining to map 96 lots 8 and 19-3, map 98 lot 8, map 105 lots 17, 18-4, 18-5, and 18-6. The applicant is GDC Saco LLC, and the zone is rural conservation. So at this point, I'll turn over to Bob as we probably start promoting some of the applicants. So Andrew, we might be asking you to bring some people in with us. I know I see at least one Green Skies person in the audience. And Bob, did you want to give any additional overview to this? I know we just had a site walk for this item.
Hi, this is Jean-Paul. Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, yep,
So the rest of my team that was at the site visit,
yes.
the plan was to go to the city building, I believe, but there was no one there to let them in. So they had to go to our contractor's office, which I think is in Portland. And they are just getting there now and logging in. So they're going to be a few minutes late.
So we had a disconnect on the Zoom versus in person. I'm sorry about that. So that's fine. We'll give them, I see actually Chip just joined us. So it sounds like they're probably at a computer right now. So, okay, so we'll give the attendees a few minutes to join us. Okay, Chip's with us. Okay. Hi there. Okay, there's Gina.
Sorry.
That's fine. Sorry for the misunderstanding on our in-person versus our Zoom. Tonight's our last Zoom night. So
Yeah, well, you already heard that. We made it to City Hall and then we had to quickly pivot to attending from our office, which is a little bit of a drive, but we're here and we're on.
perfect timing. Okay, are there any other members of your team that you don't see promoted right now that you want to have join?
I think we're all set.
You're all here. Okay, great. Okay, so first I'm just going to turn back over to Bob for just a brief overview of where we are with this process. As I mentioned, we did just see you folks for a site walk, and we did see you at our previous June 1st meeting. So, and for anyone listening in from the public, this item starts on page 15 of our digital packet. So Bob, any new information or any overview you'd like to give?
A little bit of both. Thank you, Chairwoman. Just a reminder, the board had seen this one time previously. The board acted to find the applications for both conditional use and for site plan review to be complete. Additionally, a handful of waivers that had been requested by the applicant, the board saw fit to grant those waivers. After further discussion at that earlier meeting, this evening's site walk was scheduled. Also, action was taken on the conditional use permit, and the board voted to grant that. So there is currently a conditional use permit for a commercial solar energy facility on roughly 127 acres off New County Road. The actual installation will occupy about 80 acres. And as the chairwoman alluded to, the board earlier late afternoon enjoyed, even though it was 92 degrees, a walk of a beautiful property. 5 separate property owners, I believe, are involved. A lot of acreage between New County Road and Buxton Road, both open fields and treed acreage as well. So the board's task this evening is to continue its review with the objective being consideration of whether or not to grant site plan approval for the proposed commercial solar installation. Since the last meeting, we've seen a June 10th letter responding primarily to issues that had been raised by Joe LaVerrier, the city engineer. Let me see, what other points that I would make. The board did hold a public hearing at the previous meeting and closed that evening, which was June 1st. This evening has been advertised as a public hearing once again. So the staff recommendation would be to open a public hearing, entertain public comment, and then arrive at closing that hearing this evening. The findings of fact, the draft findings and the draft conditions of approval are drafted such that if the board chose to move ahead this evening and consider site plan approval, that's certainly easily within the realm of possibility. There are outstanding other levels of regulation that are in play here, as was discussed during the site walk. This is a large enough project area-wise that, as the board is aware, the project is also subject to what's called a site location of development review, with the potential for a permit being issued by the Maine DEP. The Army Corps of Engineers is also involved with its own review. And then there's also a Natural Resource Protection Act, or NRPA permit, that is part of the site law permit that's under review by the DEP. The conditions are drafted so that if the board chose to grant the local approval tonight, site plan review approval, that there are conditions separate that make clear that this approval is only valid if the site law permit is issued by the DEP and if the NERPA permit similarly is issued by the DEP. So no constraints on the board deciding to act tonight if it wishes. The sole remaining thing I would discuss is the situation with financial guarantee. As the board is aware, any sort of development project that comes through the board, whether a subdivision or a site plan or a conditional use, prior to the start of site work, financial guarantee is required by the city, wherein the applicant simply provides a cost estimate for the site work. So, moving dirt, installing utilities, landscaping, paving, etc. So that's pretty routine. And this applicant will not be an exception. There will be a cost estimate submitted further down the line. The city engineer will review that and either say, yes, it looks good, or ask for some changes. Once that is finalized, a financial guarantee is put into place. Typically, it's a letter of credit drawn on a bank or a credit union. That remains in place during the life of the project. And once the project's completed to the city's satisfaction and per the approved plans, the need for the financial guarantee goes away and the city releases it. So that's pretty routine. What's a little out of the ordinary here, and this is true for just a few different uses in Saco, for a commercial solar installation. Certainly it's true also for a wind turbine and a couple of other things. Once the useful life of that facility is over, and in this case, I think we're talking the realm of 25 to 30 years, the preferred route, for obvious reasons, is that it be removed. There are thousands of solar panels involved in this project, so no doubt the owners of the property who are leasing would like to see it gone, the city as well. So there's a second financial guarantee, and that is specifically for the removal of the installation at the end of its life. We continue to discuss that. That has not been finalized. The DEP and the city each require such a financial guarantee for removal. The DEP at the applicant's request has already suggested that it would be willing to forego its own requirement if the city has essentially an acceptable requirement on its own books. We do. So we continue to discuss with the applicant just how that is going to work out. Once again, there is a draft condition of approval suggesting that okay for the board to move ahead this evening, but that this financial guarantee for removal shall be finalized and found to be acceptable by the city attorney before the applicant gets too far into this project. So again, it's not finalized. The draft condition of approval does address it in full. I think staff is quite comfortable with it. So that's pretty much, board members, where we're at this evening. If I can answer any questions, I'd be glad to.
Thank you, Bob. Board members, any questions for Bob? Jen, I see your hand up.
For clarification, Bob, the financial guarantee for removal, where it's a projected 25 to 30 year from now anticipated expense, does it require just evidence of aptitude to be able to do so in the here and now, or is there a reserve for funds that's required to be alongside this project so it's available at the time of their exit?
Yeah, it's more the latter part of that question, Jen. The full disclosure, the applicant essentially has asked that the city accept the current day ability of what is a large company, Green Skies, the applicant, to basically ensure that it will be liable for meeting the expense of removal in a quarter century. I, in turn, flipped that over to the city attorney and asked Tim very simply, Tim, based on the required language for decommissioning, does what the applicant has proposed meet muster? Tim was pretty quick to say it does not. This is going to have to be drawn on a separate entity, likely a commercial bank, federal credit union, something along those lines. But the city's existing language, and I'm looking at section BII 21 of the zoning ordinance. Subsection F talks about financial guarantee for removal. And an applicant shall submit what's called an evergreen financial guarantee to be approved by the city attorney in the amount of 150% of the estimated costs of the removal tasks. And it goes on from there. So Evergreen has been advised of the city attorney's response on this. Simply, and I'd say rather routinely, we've simply agreed to continue discussing. I have little doubt that we're going to arrive at common ground on this, and that Evergreen is, Green Skies is going to arrive at the provision of an acceptable financial guarantee. Again, the city requires them for gravel pits, for wind turbines, any sort of use that's a little bit out of the ordinary, and that an applicant or owner simply walking away and leaving it as it operated would not be in the best interest of the general public. Requires that a financial guarantee for closing it down, removing it, etc., must be put into place. So we will get there. We're not there yet. It's a continuing discussion. And again, I'd just like to emphasize, staff's comfortable with that being a condition of approval. The board may wish to discuss that and feel differently, but I just want you to know how the staff feels.
Thank you, Bob. Jen, does that answer your question for now? Okay, board members, any other questions right now for Bob? Okay, not hearing any. I will just turn over to the applicant briefly to see if you have anything new to add that Bob did not already cover. And then after that, board members will just be aware that we have advertised this evening as a public hearing. And so we can take it from there. But for the applicants, did you have anything else you wanted to share or add right now for us? No? Okay, no other info. Board members, any questions specific to the applicants right now? Not hearing any. Jeff, yep.
So do these panels only last 20 to 25 years? Bob, is that what you're saying?
Jeff, indeed. And, I apologize. The volume of material here that's been submitted, plus the relatively time-wise, the months that this has been under review. I know I've encountered that within the application materials. But as I recall, and perhaps Gina or another representative of the applicant could respond, but as I recall, indeed, there is a 20 to 25 year lifespan. The lease is for roughly that amount of period, or that amount of time. There is the ability within those leases to extend for a handful of additional, I'm going to say 4 to 5 year periods. But yeah, definite lifespan, and definitely there will be some point in the future where I assume the owners of the property where the installation is going to take place as well as the city, would like to see all this hardware removed, and that's what the financial guarantee for removal is all about.
So if Green Skies is not around in 20, 25 years, does this financial agreement deal with that issue and remove all the panels?
That's absolutely the goal of the ordinance, yes. And I mean, there has to be recognition given that as healthy and well-performing a company as Green Skies may be today, all you have to do is pick up the business pages of the newspaper to, look at similarly large and much larger companies. Gee, they were here 5 years ago and they looked so strong, and they're no longer here. So I think in part that was the city attorney's response. We appreciate Green Sky's proposal to essentially guarantee the removal of its own installation and facility, but the city would be much more comfortable having that guaranteed on a financial basis by a federally chartered bank or credit union or something similar to those.
One more question, I guess. How'd you come up with the cost of removal? And what this bond, the amount of the bond?
Yep, and to be clear, we have not yet, and there's nothing unusual there. Typically, any given site plan or subdivision that comes in, a review and approval would be completed. Then moving into the next phase is when we'd be looking for a cost estimate worksheet. There's a very standard one pager that the city provides to applicants. They complete it, and generally it's the excavating company that puts that together. They submit it back. Mr. Laveria reviews it, agrees or disagrees, asks for adjustments as may be necessary. But yeah, the burden will be on the applicant to propose not only the standard financial guarantee by providing a cost estimate, but also to arrive at the financial guarantee for removal. That's going to probably be somewhat more complicated, but the burden will be on the applicant, and then the burden will be on the city to take a look at it and potentially, have to go out of house. Perhaps speak with a more specialized entity that has dealt with or does deal with the removal of these things. So yeah, it will be addressed in full. It's just that essentially it's still to come rather than having been accomplished already at this point.
Can I just add that we did prepare a decommissioning plan that was submitted to DEP with the site law application, and it's also in the city application. I don't remember what attachment it was, but there's a whole description of how we go about decommissioning. It was, I believe that one was stamped by the VHB. I think you reviewed it as well, and it shows the guidelines or references, different costs for the various activities of removal and what they're for. And I think it's on a per megawatt basis that our engineering team calculated. So if you could have an interest in more detail, it's in the attachment to the application.
Thank you, Gina. Jeff, does that answer your questions for now on this?
Well, sort of. I mean, it's hard to judge what costs are going to be a year from now, never mind 25 years from now. Mm-hmm. So I guess I have a concern with that. But,
as far as our approach, though, like Bob was outlining, with this being something that the city and the applicant are working through, do you have any questions specific to that in terms of building it into the conditions of approval?
No, not at this point.
Okay. All right. Other board members, any other questions, comments? Again, I'll remind everyone that we have advertised this as a public hearing for tonight.
Madam Chair, Matt P. here.
Yes.
I move to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Matt D, thank you for the second. I'll call everyone for a vote. Jen,
Yes.
Jeff? Jeff, sorry, I didn't hear you. Was that a yes?
Yes.
Thanks. Matt P,
Yes.
Joyce,
Yes.
Matt D,
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Okay, Andrew, turning over to you for your assistance. We have just opened another public hearing.
So if any members of the public at this time would like to address the planning board, please indicate so by raising your hand if you're using the Zoom app. If you are dialing in by phone, you'll press *9. So first up, we have Jason Labont. Jason, I'm going to promote you and you'll be allowed to unmute.
Okay.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Yep, you're with us. If you just want to start off with your name and address.
Hi, Jason Labonte. I'm one of the landowners. So I just want to clarify, I think there's a little confusion. So as far as, the solar panels, it's not like 20 years and they're dead. From my understanding, we're dealing with all solar panels, not only with Green Skies, but with all the solar panels we've been doing on the houses, is that, the solar panels have not so much a life expectancy, but more of a guarantee of how much power they can produce in the first 20 to 25 years. They could continue to produce power after that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong at Green Skies, but I want to say it's like 85% efficiency still after 20 some odd years. So they still can produce power. So that's not like, 20 years they're dead, you're going to pull them out of the ground and throw them in the trash. So that's not it at all. They can produce power for 40, 50 years. The lease agreements that we have with Green Skies is the first 20 years is guaranteed lock in. And then we have 4 5-year extensions on top of that. So we have possible lease agreements to go a full 40 years with this system. And also in our signing and contracts that we have with them is we also have, which I appreciate the city kind of backing up as far as making them pull it out if, that's needed at the end of 20, 30, 40 years. But that's also in our lease agreements as well, that they're required to do. And we can also take attorney action if they choose not to as well. So there's, and I'm just one of the landowners. So, so there could be multiple actions against them if they do not do what they do at the end. So I just wanted to kind of clarify, longevity and what's going to happen at the end as far as what we're seeing as lease owners as well. So that's pretty much all I could say.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
So
Andrew, we have another hand raised.
we did just a moment ago, and it seems to have disappeared. I'll just state again that, okay, here we go. So we've got Rebecca Wing. Rebecca, I'm going to promote you now. Rebecca, you've been promoted. You can go ahead and unmute and start your video if you'd like and address the planning board.
I'm not actually Rebecca Wing, but she's sitting right beside me. My name is Terry Freilich, and Rebecca and I are married, and we own the property abutting on the project. And we appreciate the opportunity to ask a question and try to clarify something. And I don't know if you have the, Rebecca went on the sidewalk today, and VHB gave them a diagram that's labeled Figure 1. Does anybody have that in front of you? Just easier. We have a question.
Yeah, you're probably referencing the packet that we were all handed today, right? The single page at our sidewalk.
All we have is one page. It says Figure 1, and it's a aerial of the whole project.
Yes, colored with some green and blue shading, right?
Right. So to orient you a little bit, at kind of a little bit towards the top, but right in the center is a dark spot. And that is a pond that's on our property. And then across from that pond is a field that we own a good part of it, not the whole field, but we own a good part of it. And then the question that we have, which I don't think will be answered today, but we would certainly love to have it answered, On this figure 1, there is a red line that is identified as limit of work. And my understanding of that is that there will not be any work done on this project on the private property owner's side of that limit of work. Do I understand that correctly?
We can, we're going to gather all of your questions and then we'll turn all of them back to the applicant for them to go right through.
Okay.
So, yep, we will ask them that question.
And the question, and there's another, if you look at that field that I just referred to on your left hand, going down that side on the left hand, there's another little squiggly there that says tree clearing limits. So what we're really interested in is what trees are going to be left on the other side of the limit of work and tree clearing limits. And I know this can't be answered today, but eventually we'd like to know what the feet is between the limits of work and limits of tree clearing, but from that line to the R side of the trees. And I don't think, I'm not sure that that can be answered today, but if it can, or somebody can speak to that, would really, by the way, we're really in favor of this project. You know, it's solar energy and we're really in favor of that. And it also preserves this wonderful farm that we live next to, the Dupuy farm, for as long as this is here. So we're not here to put a wrench in this project. We think it's a really wonderful project. We would just like to know precisely, exactly what trees are going to be left that border on our property.
Wonderful. We'll have the applicant address those questions. And could you just give me your actual street address one more time for the record?
Sure. The city gave us a new name about 1.5 years ago because we live on a private road. We're kind of sad about it because we lost the address Smutty Lane, which we kind of liked the address Smutty Lane, but we're now 7 Field Way, which is just off Smutty Lane.
Yes. And the board members who are with us tonight at the site walk certainly remember your house from tonight. So thank you for joining us with those questions. We'll have the applicant address them as soon as we gather others from other members of the public.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Andrew, are there any other hands raised right now?
I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. I'll just state one more time, if anyone would like to address the planning board on this issue using the Zoom app, you can raise your hand. If you're dialing in by phone, you can press *9. I'm seeing no further hands raised.
Okay, great. Let's turn over to the applicant for a moment. So, Hina, I'm not sure who from your team might want to address some of those questions that were raised regarding the limit of clearing and limit of tree cutting.
Sure. We've been kind of behind the scenes here while this call is going on. We've been looking at the PDFs and taking some measurements, and we think it ranges between 15 and 30 feet, depending on where you are in that stretch that the abutter was asking about. So it's not an exact measurement, but it's in that range. And we're talking about trees left beyond the limit of work.
Okay, great. Board members, any other follow-up questions to that topic?
I guess I would just say we can also follow up with a more exact measurement, which we can get into CAD and make more precise measurements. So we certainly want the opportunity to give more accurate information, but that's our quick look at it.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, and just a reminder to any members of the public listening in that we still have the public hearing open, and if you'd like to speak, you're more than welcome to use the raise hand feature.
Alyssa, we're getting a raised hand from Rebecca again. I'm going to go ahead and promote them.
I just want to have a very quick clarification of what I think I heard. And what I think I heard, is that Gil that was speaking or?
No, this is Sean Hale from VHB.
Okay. what I think I heard was that you're going to come up with more precise information, but as you rough estimate now, you think there are going to be between 15 and 30 feet of trees left from that limit of work. Is that correct? 15 to 30 feet of trees abutting our property from that line of work that's on the figure here. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
To the west of the limit of
So in layperson's term, we would have between 15 and 30 feet of trees abutting our field. Is that correct? I mean, it's not precise, I know.
trees that are there that will just be retained.
Abutting our field. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to see if that's your more precise estimate when you, as this moves along, and I appreciate you giving us some idea about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Andrew, I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Me neither.
Okay. Board members, other questions, comments?
Madam Chair, Bob here. I just want to remind the board, I appreciated the attendance of Rebecca Wing at the site walk, but also Maria O'Brien, and I think Ms. O'Brien is a neighbor of the wing, of Ms. Wing and Mr. Freilich. And I just want to remind the board that the question was raised, is it possible that the applicant may be asked and or may be willing to do some tree plantings? Because while Mr. Freilich and Ms. Wing may have something of a 15 to 30 foot tree buffer between them and the installation, it sounded as though Ms. O'Brien was concerned that there would be no buffer. So she posed the question, is it possible that the planting of trees could be considered and or even required, requested or required by the board? So just a reminder, and I wanted to make sure the O'Brien's interests were made evident. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Board members, other discussion on this? Also, just a reminder, we still have the public hearing open.
Madam Chair, Matt P. here.
Yes.
I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Matt P. Is there a second? Matt D. I see your hand for the second. Thank you.
Second.
Without any further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Jen?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Matt P?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Matt D?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Okay, so we have held the public hearing and have now closed it. Okay, back to the board. We have outstanding topics that we've been discussing this evening regarding financial guarantees, regarding trees.
Madam Chair, Matt P. here.
Yes.
I'll start. Is regarding the financial guarantee, I think I'm in favor in the way Bob described it. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And then I'm also in support of, some of the trees in between kind of the two clusters, that far cluster and then sort of that middle area. I'm in support of seeing some more vegetation in there. Obviously, we're not going to see a whole cluster in a row of 40-year-old mature trees, but some vegetation in there, maybe a little bit of low-lying stuff, maybe some taller evergreens that we can see mature later on, I think would be nice.
Thank you, Matt. Board members, any other comments related to these topics? Jen, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Likewise, I would be in favor of having conversation to move this forward, particularly with the financial clause in place, because it sounds like DEP will defer to the city to oversee that, and that they are in agreement with whatever the city's parameters are. They'll view that as adequate. So as long as the city looks out for the interest of that, I'm in favor of moving something forward without the language to know how to do so, which I might defer to somebody who maybe has those words.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Other board members, Matt D.
Yeah, I just had a question. I didn't see this before, but looking at the map and the open space where we're talking about putting the trees in, I noticed there's a line in here that says security fence that will be listed, and maybe this is more directed toward the applicant. I would just be curious, what is that security fence? Because that's a big open space, and if they put trees there, that will help with cover that. But I'm just curious, what does that fence look like? Is it a tall, any idea what that looks like, or what from the fence standpoint?
Okay. Go ahead. I'm turning back to the applicant now for some clarity on that. Yep.
It's a chain link fence. It's a 6-foot fence, but it's installed with about a foot gap underneath to allow for wildlife passage.
Okay. And just a chain link. Okay, thank you. If that answers the question.
And that does, just again to clarify, that runs in that section where there's a gap in the tree line that we were all talking about earlier. Okay.
Entire perimeter of the site.
Okay. Yeah.
Madam Chair, Matt P. here again.
Yes.
With that, Matt brought up a good point. I think at our first meeting, I asked about a security gate or whatnot at the drive entry. It wasn't really clear if there was going to be a gate there. I think the applicant was going to double check. They thought that there would be a gate there, and I believe I inquired about the type of gate, and maybe asking if it was something more decorative than just chain link fence out of the road area. Maybe just a little bit of clarity there.
Sure. Gina, do you have anything to add for that? Sorry, you might need to just come closer to your microphone. We lost what you said.
It is typically a double swing chain link with a lock on it, a lock box that is coded and the city would have access to.
Okay. Matt, any other comments there, questions?
No additional questions. My only thought, and I inquired about it, it's, I guess I feel like if it were something more decorative and more intentional, it would elude and give the appearance of maybe an area that's more maintained, or maybe someone's private property. Obviously it's private property, but maybe someone's home. Just a bar gate and whatnot usually alludes to areas that aren't that there aren't a lot of people around, and we just don't want to see anybody trespassers or whatnot. It just kind of dress it up. That's all, a little bit. That was just why I was asking.
And this is Jean Paul. If we're happy to have that as a condition of the project, if you would like. It would not be the first time that we've added more decorative fencing. And there's some options that we could do with like cedar wood. That's a naturally durable wood that can last. But there are minimum height requirements because of the National Electric Code. So there's some things we can work around and some things we can't.
Sure, I appreciate that. Not looking to create anything super elaborate or like a full stockade fence or anything like that. Just yeah, wood sounds nice. I think that would be fine by me. Something simple is totally fine. I appreciate it.
Matt, you're talking just at the gate itself, like the entry point to the access road that's visible from the street.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Board members, any other thoughts on topics we've been discussing, including now the access gate, which Matt just raised? Joyce?
This, I agree with what Matt said about the, I mean, it sounds like the applicant is fine doing the access gate in something more attractive like cedar. And I agree with him on the way that Bob has proposed the financial guarantees be taken care of. I think we're pretty safe there. And I do like the idea of having some sort of low-lying evergreens. I understand you don't want to have tall trees close to the panels because you're creating shade, but to create, more of a buffer, for a visual buffer for the neighbors.
Great, thank you, Joyce. Maybe just turning back to the applicant for a second regarding that tree area between the two existing tree lines.
So we did walk that with Marie O'Brien at the tail end of the meeting, and we were walking to a point where you could actually see their property, so a line of sight up from there, and we realized that it's not necessary to really bring the tree line all the way across that gap, but there would be a reasonable point where we could provide additional screening.
Okay.
You have to walk pretty far, I guess it's south to north up that way before you can actually see some the silo on the property and other features. So we would look at that more carefully.
Okay. Board members, how are we feeling about that item with the applicant's response, knowing that it would become an additional condition of approval tonight? Seeing some heads nodding from Matt D, from Joyce, Matt P, Jen. Okay. All right. So board members, at this point, we've talked about a couple items that would become additional conditions of approval. Any direction from anyone right now?
Alyssa, while board members think for a moment, I'll just mention Jason Labont has his hand raised again. I know the public hearing has been closed, but I don't know if the board would like to hear from them. Just figured I would notify you.
Thank you.
Do we have to approve hearing from Jason? Because I'm okay hearing from Jason.
We would have to because we have closed the public hearing. So
I'm okay with. I'm okay. Do I need to make a motion to let Jason speak or something like that?
Bob, how would you suggest we approach it?
Well, the board can always allow public comment, so no motion necessary.
Okay. So
I'll go ahead and promote Jason now unless anyone on the board objects.
Thank you. Hi, Jason.
Hey, everybody, how we doing? So I just wanted to comment on the gate, which would be coming on my property. I guess, as a developer, my biggest concern with doing a fancy gate is one, nobody lives there. All right, so you're gonna have kids probably parking next to it, maybe vandalizing it. You got nobody maintaining it, nobody taking care of it. I prefer something more simpler, more functionality than fancy. I mean, it's a gate for a road. It's not like an entrance to a subdivision, like a gated community or something like that. So I think that should be something that should be discussed between myself and Green Skies more than the planning board, because I don't think this is really an entrance to a community, or so to speak. So I don't really see any benefit with, trying to make it nice. I think more functionality, low maintenance. There's nobody going to be living there, nobody really taking care of it, and try to reduce possibility of vandalism, because, if kids happen to be, parking up against the gate, who knows, they might want to try to break in or whatever. So I think something with a little bit higher security is going to work a lot better than something that's going to be just pretty. But that's my only comment. So sorry to interrupt you guys.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, board members, additional thoughts now. We've talked about the tree line in that gap area. We've talked about the gate to the access road. We've talked about the financial guarantee. Any other questions, comments? Not hearing any. Is Jen? Yep.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a feeble attempt at drafting a motion to move this matter forward positively with the condition of the financial guarantee and the cooperative buffered tree line expansion.
Thank you, Jen. Is there a second?
Matt P here, I would second.
Thank you, Matt P. And any further discussion? Joyce?
Just to clarify, so your motion doesn't include anything about the gate? You're just talking about the evergreen buffer and the adoption?
As I understand the proposal, it has a security gate in place already. And at the awareness of Mr. Labonte having that be on his private property, I do think it's beyond the reach of the planning board to determine what that looks like. So I'm not including it in my motion.
Board members, any other discussion? Questions for Jen on the motion? Any clarity needed on the motion?
Madam Chair, Matt here, Matt P. I know I brought up the gate. I would like to see, I understand the security, I understand the maintenance. I guess I'm coming from a different angle of thinking if it's gives the appearance of a little bit higher, higher quality material, that it would help deter people away, that it gives the perception that people do live there, or it is something else, some place that people do frequent quite a bit to keep, transients away. That being said, I don't feel strongly enough, to push the issue. So that's why I have seconded the motion. So the applicant, the developer, and the landowners can talk about it further, and I don't think it's necessary, from my point of view, to add it as an additional condition at this point, given the discussion we've had.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Any other comments? Any clarity needed on the motion that Jen made before we vote? Jeff?
Would the financial guarantee be in place before any work is started on the project?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'd say that can be our goal, yeah. For sure, the financial guarantee that guarantees the successful completion of site work will be in place before work starts. And to the extent that we've already been discussing and each side understanding where the other's coming from on the financial guarantee for removal, I would suggest that could be in place before work starts on the project too. Given what I've heard from the applicant, work starting on the project may or probably is still a few months off. So can we have the financial guarantee for removal wrapped up within that time period? No reason in the world not so.
Thank you, Bob. Jeff, does that answer your question?
Yeah, could we make that a condition of the approval?
So add some clarity to that. Yep.
I would support that as well, Madam Chair. Matt P here.
Okay. So any other questions right now regarding Jen's motion and the clarification that was just made? Okay, not hearing any questions, any further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Joyce?
Yes.
Matt D?
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Matt P,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. All right, thank you to the applicants. Thank you to members of the public who joined us this evening. Bob, do you need anything else from us on this item?
Not a thing. No, I appreciate, thank you, board members, as usual. And I think we're at the end of our agenda, so thank you for that. Next meeting, a reminder, we're a little off schedule in July. It will be two weeks before the next meeting, which will fall on the 13th of July. It'll be on a Tuesday. The agenda is pulled together already, so between now and then, I would love to see board members enjoy a great holiday, enjoy the hot weather to the extent that's possible. And as usual, if you have any questions or concerns, get in touch, but we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Great, thank you, Bob. And we are back in person for that July 13th meeting, correct?
Indeed, and we will make sure to remind people of that. Haven't yet decided, could very well be upstairs in the City Hall auditorium just to provide a little space for all of us.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. It's 8:04 and we'll be adjourning for the night. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
All right.